together, keeping our community together, reaching out and supporting. These are difficult, interesting times for everyone. And a lot of it is driven by uncertainty. Uncertainty in the new way of the world of work, the new way of doing business, the new way of doing human communication, and just literally going to be different. We're on the fourth day of the shelter in place. Come the 11th day, what's it going to be like? Come the 21st day, what's it going to be like? We don't know. Some people work from home, some haven't. I think there are tips on both that everybody can learn. There are best practices. But we wanted to kick it out, start our first one with someone that I have utmost respect for. I think he's one of the, I enjoy his podcast. I enjoy very much his Twitter following. He's extraordinarily opinionated. I think one of the best journalists in our business. I think he's covered it long and well. I think he works for the hottest publication, constantly on the edge doing stuff. They're leading the industry in terms of thinking, thought leadership. We've asked our friend Brian Morrissey, who's been to Big before, to be our first guest and to sort of talk about how Brian sees the world, what's happening, because he can bring both the national and global perspective. And Zach and I have set it up for people to be able to ask questions. So
let's see, the value set as February 18th through March 18th.
Make sure you mute. Please mute.
February month.
If someone could hit mute, I'm hearing about people scheduling meetings. Brian's going to turn it over to Brian. I think Nick Fries may join from Digiday, but it is a real pleasure to introduce someone to most of you. Hopefully you'll get to, now you're going to virtually get to know who he is. Brian Morrissey, President and Editorial Director and Content Guru at Digiday and all of its publications. Brian.
Okay, thank you. It was good to hear someone overhear someone setting up meetings. You know, it's good to see those are still happening. You know, I don't have a ton of prepared remarks, mostly because we're dealing with like the same tsunami that all of you are dealing with, and trying as best we can to figure our way out of it, like, and things change day by day. So I'll probably start a little bit talking about that, because I think these are the sort of shared challenges that a lot of us have, even if our businesses are slightly different. And I think one of the unique things about this coronavirus crisis is that it's almost too big for a lot of us and the people who we work with to even get our arms around about how big it is. And I think that's why a lot of companies, probably ourselves included, were sort of caught unaware. I mean, none of us had a pandemic playbook that was ready. We knew exactly what to do. And so that presented a whole bunch of challenges. I mean, I know I go back to, like, you know, the .com bust and then 9/11 right afterwards being a shock, and then the financial crisis. To me, this is like more like a little bit more like 9/11 in that it was an exogenous shock to the system, not a normal financial bubble kind of shock. And I think people go through a lot of different phases of it, and it's usually, you know, kind of like that Kubler-Ross stages of grieving, where you go into anger and there's a long period of bargaining and denial. And I think denial existed for a long time. And bargaining, well, if we could just move a couple things here and there, you know, this is mostly a Chinese problem. And, you know, for us, like, events are the majority of our business. So these are really challenging times because there are no events. There are virtual events now, but there are no in-person events, and they're not going to be in-person events for many months, really. I mean, you know, we had to make a decision And it's amazing to think this was only a couple weeks ago to postpone a whole series of events. And it's obvious now, but it wasn't really obvious then. And there was some thought, well, we could maybe push through. We saw some competitors trying to push through, and now they got to send emails to people that went to their events saying, oh, by the way, a couple people had the coronavirus who were at that event. I mean, you don't want that. I think one time we had like food poisoning at an event. I thought that was bad, but I mean, if you give someone the coronavirus, that's got to be a brand. But I think dealing with this is interesting. That's the word, because we're all dealing with like the business ramifications and the dislocation and the uncertainty. I think, John, that word will constantly come up. But at the same time, we're dealing with these kind of dislocations and uncertainty in our own lives and in the lives of our teams. We're all. I'm doing this from Bluebell, Pennsylvania, which is not where I live. I live in Brooklyn, but my wife and I decided to leave there because my parents are in Florida, thank God, and they're not here. So this was a little bit better place to wait this out. But our teams are spread out, and communication is really important in a time of crisis. And I think it's a time of crisis, and that adds an extra level of complexity because you can't communicate very easily. You have to do it over Zoom, and you have to have sometimes even difficult conversations, and you can't even be in the same room with people. And it's also hard because I think you're trying to deal with understanding that people's own lives are in upheaval. They have parents and grandparents. They themselves might be at a higher risk with a compromised immune system. They certainly have relatives of that. But at the same time, I'm sure all of your businesses are facing varying degrees of challenge, from pretty bad to this is existential. And so juggling all that has been difficult. But I think all that aside, what we're seeing in the industry is that word uncertainty. And I mean, everyone on this call who has been through one of these recessions before due to a calamitous event, knows that what this leads to is just like, it's like the Holland Tunnel at 4:30. Everything gets backed up. Nobody makes a decision. It's not just the cruise lines that are stopping advertising. It's not just airlines. There's tons of people who are taking down their advertising. They're going quiet. They don't know if they have things set up in order to fulfill demand. Why are they going to try to stoke demand? And they're also dealing with the same problems all of us are dealing with our own teams and employees, and them being dispersed. And I mean, so far we have luckily have no one who has coronavirus, but many of these companies themselves have outbreaks that are dealing with. So I think we're sadly, unfortunately, we're only at the start of this because this uncertainty is only going to build, and I think the problems are pretty clearly going to get worse before they get better. So that's a challenge operating a business, but I think it's also a challenge in just how you deal with that internally, because you can't bullshit people, and you can't tell them this is gonna, oh yeah, the weather will get warmer and then it'll be fine. That's not true. At the same time, you can't have people who can't get out of bed because everything's terrible. But I think what we're seeing again is really just a lot of categories are shutting down advertising, and
Does that mean they're stopping it, or they're just, or is they pausing
it? But that's the same thing. No one says we're gonna never, they're pausing because they're uncertain, and this uncertainty, piles up. That's what I say about the Holland Tunnel. It just like keeps piling up. One person honks their horn, and then next thing you know, everyone's honking their horn, and it's kind of not all that different. And because there's a lot of things that are outside of their control. You know, it's hard to tell people to go shopping when there's nowhere to go shop. It's certainly not a time to go to Disney World because there is no Disney World. And on and on. Yeah, there are a few categories that are doing well. Zoom's doing great. But you know, you look at the largest categories, and they're really dealing with very, you know, close to existential. I mean, retail. I mean, retail is in such a challenge. We're seeing a lot of DTC brands who were originally going to be like opening up retail stores. They're just saying that's off. We're going back to DTC. You know, travel is done for a while. I mean, they're going to need, anytime an industry needs a government bailout, it's not a good time to be up with a lot of ads. And there's no demand to harvest. You know, automotive, I think, is probably one right area, because they're going to have to prime the pump, because these like 0% interest rates, they're going to be coming out with all kinds of deals. And because of the long consideration cycle, you know, what better time to figure out your next car than when you're stuck in Bluebell, Pennsylvania. So, although I'm in Brooklyn.
Mortgage refinancing.
Mortgage refinancing. Yeah, I mean, there are a few categories but one of the other sort of side things that we're finding is publishers are getting hit by a few forces. I mean, there's news publishers, there's a lot of attention obviously on this story, and you know, they have to cover this nonstop. Guess what the number 2 keyword block list term is? Coronavirus. So they're getting all of this flood of attention to coronavirus stories, but advertising is blocked on a lot of it. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I keep seeing those IAS, I think it's IAS, the clouds on like the New York Times homepage. You know, when they block something not being brand safe, it comes up with a display ad with those blue sky with the clouds. Interesting metaphor. And so, you know, publishers are really, I mean, they weren't in great shape before, and now they've got like, they can't even like, many of them are taking down paywalls. I got an email today saying we should make all of our coverage for free because, you know, it's that, well, I mean, my God, how are we supposed to keep paying people? Yeah, I get it, but like, you know, advertising, and then you can't do subscriptions supposedly. I don't know what the option is. So there's a lot of challenges. I think, again, it keeps going back to that word uncertainty until there is like people can see their way out, an end to this, even if it's far off. Like, I just think nothing is going to happen, because everyone's just, you know, I guess a lot of you are like in San Francisco, and so there's the shelter in place thing, but I mean, it's very unclear how long that's going to last. You know, with New York, I left because they look like they were going in that direction. Maybe they're not, because Cuomo's fighting with de Blasio and all this, but
We have a question from Chris. Chris, you want to add, you got something for Brian? Hello? Please unmute and ask your question. Let Zach know if you want to ask. We got a question. Chris, all right, the one that comes to mind, there's an old adage that when times are good, you advertise, and when times are tough, you advertise even more. You know, it was an adage that is sort of not one of those John Wanamaker type quotes, but CFOs are probably saying cut budgets. Marketing usually gets cut first. CMOs are saying we've got to make sure we keep our brand in front of people. Is it too early to even know? My argument at this week, people are just trying to figure out what the hell's going on.
yeah, I mean, I think people right now are concerned about the safety of their employees, trying to figure out how to set up a remote work environment for an unknown period of time. Trying to make sure that also that people's mental health is you know, top of mind as you're trying to deal with all these challenges. And I know every time that there's a downturn, there's this thought that it's like, well, look at Cadbury. Cadbury during the financial crisis did those guerrilla drumming ads, and that supposedly led to an uptick. I just don't think CFOs are going to buy it. They never have, and the people pushing it generally have a reason to push it. Like, they want the advertising to continue. I mean, I do too. I just think that when you're looking at the levers that companies have to, if you're a CFO, I would guess you would see like, shit, everyone's stuck at home, and there's no demand for us to harvest or even like to stoke it, and we have no idea when we could even harvest it. Even if we did like stoke this demand with advertising, we got to cut costs. And I think companies are given a lot of grief about layoffs, but it's really the last option. And so before you get to layoffs, you got to cut your operating expenses somehow. And so advertising is the easiest to kind of turn on and off. So I don't see that ever like stopping. I don't know if there are any like cases. There are always like these examples, but I just don't think that it's all that persuasive to companies facing crisis. And not even knowing when they can like really get, I don't know. To me, it's just like, it's so hard because there's so much uncertainty that when things will become even like an approximation of normal. Like a normal recession would be great.
Yesterday in our board prep call for this is sort of just some of the thinking that surmised from around here, and I'd love to get your response. And again, if you have a question, let Zach know, hit the raise your hand on Zoom, and we're going to plug you right in. Is that March and April are going to be in the dogs. Some of the language went a lot further, but by May, people are going to be antsy, open up. People who have June 30 fiscal year ends, there's going to be some activity. Obviously, y'all do significant events. The event world is topsy-turvy. There's a feeling that May may be a turnaround in the sense of this uptick in some kind, is that the next 30 days are going to just be hell, and then some activity. Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think the next 30 days are going to be hell. I mean, we haven't even seen like the beginning of the worst, I don't think. I mean, right now, this is all, if you think about it, a week ago, there was a lot of people saying this whole thing was a hoax. It was another thing like a superstorm that Weather Channel plays up for ratings and whatnot. But like, that's obviously off the table. But I think there's still this lingering, it's not real enough to people, and like it'll become real when like, at best, they'll know someone who knows someone who died from this, and at worst they'll know someone. And that's the next 30 days, whether it's an official shelter in place, we're all going to be like inside for 30 days. That's whether they order a nationwide quarantine, what that looks like. It's pretty obvious, like with how this has been handled in other countries and how it's spread in other countries and the lack of testing here, that the next 30 days there is like no economy. Like so
Kelly has a question. Kelly?
Yeah, I'm just I know there's a lot of doom and gloom, but I'm a glass half full kind of person, and wondering what is the silver lining here, if any? Because right now I see like there's a ton of opportunity with streaming, and I don't know how to, I don't want to say capitalize on that, but capitalize on that. So where do you see that going or growing?
I mean, one of the things that's sort of like what we think about when our coverage of it is like we keep using, well, one is like internally we keep talking about adapting, right? Like these, you know, I kind of hate the things like, oh, you can't control what you can't control, because it's sort of like, sort of throws your hands up, but like, you know, you can adapt. And like, so seeing how people adapt, I think is really fascinating, because this is a terrible experiment, but like, when have we ever had this massive of, it's not even an A/B test, it's just a gigantic test where the entire world like does completely different things. Like, you know, so we've been talking about in our coverage about this being an accelerant more so. So like accelerating, what trends will this accelerate? Right. So there's like an existing trend towards like video conferencing isn't new. Like, you know, we've been using Zoom. Now, I mean, I think I've been on Zoom all freaking day. This is a little this is a little break being on a WebEx instead of a Zoom. You know, work from home has been like a trend that has, you know, been happening for, I can remember like Fast Company having the cover, you'll work anywhere and stuff like this, like 20 years ago. It's just going to accelerate all of these trends, good and bad, I think. But there's never been a bigger like test of all of this. You think about like, you know, streaming and come out of this really well. And maybe maybe we won't go back to the office. Who knows?
I mean, that one thing has been, Helena has a question. Helena, you want to ask that? I think that's something to ask Brian, and then we'll open that up. And Paul have a question. Helena?
Oh, my question was actually, sure, for you, Brian, as well. Maybe you can start. How have you seen collaboration among team members thrive during this time away from home, or is it too early for you to see that? And I would love to hear how other people in this conference have solved that.
Yeah, we definitely are going to bring that bait because you brought that up yesterday. We'd love to get Brian's take on that. And then Paul
Yeah, it's
will follow up.
It's funny because we've always been like kind of not very dispersed, and you know, now we're sort of forced to all be remote. I almost think people are communicating more, weirdly enough. And I think part of it is the unnaturalness of this test, you know. I think, you know, people understand that everyone is in themselves are really stressed and anxiety and filled with anxiety. And, you know, we encourage people to stay connected with each other as much as like, you know, stay connected with your manager or anything like this. And I think it's been good to see people, you know, come up with new forms of connectivity and stuff. You know, just we're doing a virtual happy hour that someone came up with tomorrow and things like this. And I think it'll be interesting to see. I'd love to hear what other people see among their own teams.
We're going to share. We got a couple of questions, and I'm going to come back to that. Paul, then Corey. So Paul Brown.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. You just mentioned earlier about people staying at home, considering their different car options, and having a lot of time to do that. One of the case studies I've seen recently was about GM's response to 9/11, and they ran a Keep America Rolling ad that eliminated APR for 18 months or something very, very long and substantial to get people back in shopping mode. And it worked in 2001. And that period was, in fact, one of the highest periods of growth for GM and cars in general that they'd ever seen. Do you foresee other industries or brands taking this kind of approach, kind of a feel good, let's get going again, discounts and get everyone back out in the marketplace?
I think so, but I just think that this, like, I think this is weird because like 9/11 was like, it was a horrible thing that happened in a day, and then there was added uncertainty because of the wars that came afterwards. But like, it was a day, and then it was like, how are we going to figure this stuff out? Whereas like, this is like a 3-month long day. You know what I mean? Like, the problem is like, we have to get through like a really terrible period. the shortage of ventilators and masks and like unfortunately thousands of people probably dying and in order before that can even happen. You know what I mean? So like I think there's it's gonna happen. It's just like it's not gonna happen until the summer, like John was saying. Like I know, for our business, we're not gonna have any event until the summer. And honestly, I don't even know if we'll be able to in the summer. I don't know if people will have any gatherings at all. I hope that people will have spent enough time at home that they're going to be like, let's go to an event. But I just think it's going to take some time for people. It's just this dislocation is just it's going to last so long that like, I was talking to my wife, I was wondering whether it'll be like, if you've ever been like in like Sweden in the summer, like they've been like cooped up inside like all winter, which lasts like 6 months. So like, when it finally gets to be summer, they really go crazy.
As a Swede, I can attest to that.
Okay, right?
As a sidebar, Paul, I
we
can tell
like
you.
in the summer. We're in the Swedish winter.
All right, and that's the way it's being described. Paul, as a sidebar, a little bit over 40% of all car leases come up for renewal in March and April. So the car companies have a great propensity to people's leases expire. So it's going to be interesting to see how the car companies take advantage. Plus the imports, fiscal years, a lot of them begin April 1. Car is going to be an interesting category. I think the next person who is Corey over WebEx.
Hey, John. Hey, Brian. How you been?
Hey, Ben.
I'm good. I'm glad to hear that you're on a WebEx now. So I had a couple comments because I had listened to you guys just talk for a second. And I'm in a unique position because I did join WebEx and I run WebEx marketing now after they acquired our last company. And it is really seeing an explosion right now. You're seeing so many people. And what was interesting, it came up in a conversation the other day, was we were having a conversation around capacity. And we were having a conversation around how do you open up, because we're giving WebEx away to everybody in the world right now for everything. And the comment that really got me thinking was that no one ever sat down from a capacity perspective and really forecasted the entire world having to go work from home on video for 7 hours a day all at once. What we're seeing is that strain being put on everything from a digital perspective. You're seeing Netflix is being asked to rein it down a little bit. It's really, really interesting. But I think that there's two big takeaways, and I tend to be very optimistic, kind of like Kelly was. The first thing is that I really think people are starting to connect more with people they work with as people and on a personal level, because like right now I'm seeing you with that big ship model behind you, and I'm seeing you in your home office, and people now start to learn more about the people they work with as a person versus as a colleague. And I think that's really interesting. I was on a video call just a little while ago with someone on my team, and my son walked in here and wanted to show me a picture. So I made him show the people on my phone the picture. And it makes people seem more human than they are when they're in a work environment, which I think is really interesting. So I do forecast that whether this is like the way business is going to work in the future, or if we will be able to go back to our offices eventually, you'll start seeing the people you work with more as humans, less as just people that I work with. So that's one big thing. The other thing is that I'm also a big fan of, if you look in history, there are revolutionary points and there are evolutionary points, and change happens one of two ways. And this is a revolutionary change because people are really being forced to rethink how they do everything. My wife is now homeschooling my kids and literally open to the idea that this might just be the way it is for the next year, because why bring them back to school next year when they're going to be completely behind? And, people are getting used to the concept of video conferencing with your kids. My kids are doing call play dates, and they are using WebEx, and they're using play dates with their buddies and stuff. And it's really interesting to see that coupled with, the one plug, like the EU uses WebEx, and they're literally on their calls with each other, telling each other how they're going to handle this. The government of the United States uses WebEx, which whether you like them or not, they got to be in communication right now. So it's really interesting to see all these use cases popping up that nobody ever really thought about. But I do think at the end, people are going to be more connected as people.
One observation that surfaced, Corey and Brian and everybody, is that how many times before this week did you do WebEx or Zoom and you just are at Google Hangout and you never show video. Most people didn't go there. Now everybody is doing what I call the Brady Bunch. Mike Densler, I'll give him the credit for it. Yesterday, he said everybody's putting their video like the Brady Bunch TV because just what you said, where's your humanity? What's your work condition? The other interesting observation that surfaced, and I have done 44 calls this week virtually, time zone, for all the people who are on the West Coast, nobody is video before 9 a.m., which I think is very interesting. If you're doing East and West on the same call, nobody is video before 9 o'clock.
I beg to differ. I'm on 5 a.m. video calls now.
It's a different world. So those are two things. I thought Mike's observation about Brady Bunch is good. And I think what you just said, I personally know already the world of education is massively screwed. Summer will no longer be an option. Schools are going to change from elementary all the way through colleges. Colleges are having to rethink. Every college in California and half of America is now closed until at least August. They're dealing with all sorts of problems. What are students now getting through virtual education? What's that going to mean? It's going to be an interesting world. I think Tony Beal had an interesting comment. Tony, you want to sort of bring that up? I'm following your train.
Oh, I just saw that Hyundai, they had an assurance program. This was a few years back, and they just brought it back and announced it to cover anyone that loses their job to COVID-19. They'll be covered for 6 months of their car payments until they get their feet back on the ground, which I thought was it's just companies that can really spring quickly and get a strong message out there. Really can, create that bond and affinity with their customers. And I think someone was talking about too, just like this is the time of year when people are renewing leases. So having that program out there certainly, creates a little bit of a cushion, and it's not as scary to actually sign the dotted line when you have something like that in front of you.
That's a good point. Any other questions? Other questions surface?
Hey, John. Chris Thorne here.
Hi, Chris.
I got a couple comments, and then I want to kind of throw it out to the group. First of all, Corey, your point about the video conferences, I actually mentioned that because I work remotely, and everybody I work with in my company are all back in New York and in DC. So I'm doing Hangouts and WebExes all the time. What I've noticed this week is people's cameras are on more than they've ever been, which is something I've been strong about, because if you're going to be on the call, be on video so you know that you're engaged with it. One of the things we did as a company, which I thought was a little corny at first, but it was actually pretty cool, that most of the people haven't worked from home, but they've shared their pets. So they had a quick 12 to 12:30 lunch, and everybody got to share their pets on the phone, which is something obviously they've never been able to do before. I thought that was kind of cool. Here's my question, because being in the podcast world, we've seen a great growth, continued growth in the listenership, especially with what's going on now that we're all working from home, just another entertainment source. But we have had a lot of clients pause, completely understand it. One is they're not going to promote if products aren't on the shelves, if they can't ship their products out. One thing I am hearing from the agencies is everybody's waiting for the clients to decide what's going on. And John, that kind of goes back to your point too. I think this week they're really trying to figure out, is that the Zooms of the world, is that the delivery services of the world, and trying to message out there. So my question to the group is everybody else seeing this? The agency's really waiting to hear from the clients directly? Are people just waiting to try to understand how to articulate the messaging in this current state of what we're all living through?
Well, anecdotally, while somebody's getting their thoughts, I'll share. I've had many conversations this week, and people are trying to figure out their messaging. Chris, I think that's the point. You come in aggressive. If you do, you're going to turn people off. If you're a mortgage company, my God, you want to scream, this is an opportunity, but do you scream it? Do you softly say it? Do you remind people that, this is a once in a lifetime rate? I think messaging, Helen and I yesterday chatted about it. I think messaging is going to take forefront in the next couple of weeks. And I think it's a big opportunity for publishers to think about positioning. I think agencies can really lead there with, what are your kind of appeals? Do you go in with humor? Do you go in with softness? Do you go in with reality? What is that tone? I think messaging is going to be strong, and how you do that will determine whether you win. I think it's important.
Hey, John, I think one thing that you also got to think about too, and I read an article about it this morning because there was a couple of people who were commenting on the same thing. You also have to start to understand the stages of the people that you're going to be messaging to in the audience. We just came out of what I considered to be stage one, which was half cynicism, half alignment, where literally half the audience was like, okay, I'll go along with this. And the other half was cynical about it. And then we're now getting into stage two, which is kind of like panic. You're starting to see that the tone of the media is changing even more than it was for the last couple of days. And we're getting more people that seem to be setting into a little bit of panic and worried about what's the next step. Every day we get to a next step that is more unreal than the previous one. Even yesterday, I was saying to my wife, I don't know what the next step possibly could be, but we're hearing rumors of what it could be. I think you have to understand that people need their time for the messaging. And in any messaging world, you always have to get past the emotional stage to get to logic. And we're not past the emotional stage yet. We're in stage two of the emotional component. And I think the logical component will kick back in, but I think a lot of brands are waiting to see, you got to get past the emotional stage before they start messaging again.
I didn't say they would execute that message. I think they're thinking about it. And I think you're right. I think that's important. Anybody else? Banking clients. I think money's going to be interesting. People visiting branches. Is there any other questions for Brian? Brian, any other comments?
I think that summed it up well. I think I liked Corey's optimism that we'll bounce back. And I think, honestly, I think the most fascinating thing, and it's been brought up a few times, is look, marketing's basically studying consumer behavior. All these massive behaviors are being changed against people's will, and I can't really imagine. I can't think of another time when we've had such massive forced changes in behaviors because of a really unique, terrible circumstance. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see what sticks of these new behaviors and which is just like, we're just going to go back. I'm betting we go back to shaking hands. I could be wrong.
I'm hoping you're right. I think communication is going to play. One interesting comment yesterday that I forgot who on the board call said, in 08 and in 01, yes, we had social media. Yeah. Didn't have it as the forefront that we do now. And when the history of this is being written, there are people, I heard a historian from Yale last night talk about the Spanish flu and the impact that it had in the United States at the time. Think about the living documents and what he or she's going to get when they write the history of this. The social channel communication is something so new, and people's ability to reach out and communicate and also be on top of stuff very quickly. I'm thinking May, we're going to start seeing activity again. I'm very much an optimist. In fact, Corey and Kelly will tell you I'm probably an optimist, but I'm thinking June we'll be touching bodies with shaking hands at events. There is one question there. Do you think everybody crowding events in September and October is going? The people may not go to as many.
Yeah.
Like everybody's trying to crowd them into September and October.
Well, no one wants to give up revenue. And virtual events like this work real well. But at the same time, they don't deliver the same kind of value that face-to-face events do, particularly with the networking and the sales aspect. It's really hard to replicate that kind of thing. So with our events, we postpone them because we're trying a new different set of events that is a little bit more kind of like this, a little bit more topic based and educational, a little less. It's less about the networking aspect of it. So we didn't convert our events. We pushed them back, and like the number of events in Q3 and Q4 is, we wrote a story. It's like, it's ridiculous, the number in September and October that are planned. I mean, now Cannes is apparently Cannes is going to be in late October. Nothing like the Riviera in late October.
I know, I saw your tracking. October is going to be brutal. You could be at an event damn near every day.
Yeah. And so, but I do think one of the accelerations that this is going to do, and look, all of these downturns do this, and maybe I'm less optimistic. I mean, I think we're on the front edge of a recession. It's pretty obvious, but like, I do think they expose the weakest players, and the strongest will get to the other side. It's going to be a shakeout of events for sure. There's too many of them, and so those that aren't truly delivering value for their attendees and their sponsors are going to get hit really hard, without a doubt. But I think that's across a lot of categories.
Thank you. I hope you and your wife enjoy Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Tom, thank you very much. Thank you, Nick. I know we appreciate it. Appreciate you kicking off our first event.
Cool. Thanks.
Well, we've got everybody else. I know Helen and a bunch of people wanted to find out about how each of you are working, some shared best tips. Any ideas anybody has that they're working from home, how they're treating? Anybody want to share some stuff or ask questions? Ideas? Hot secret restaurants that are doing great takeaway, special walking places, podcasts, Netflix things that you want to share? This is what community is about.
Yeah, I think, Jacob, do you have some insight into how our agency's been communicating, keeping up morale?
Yeah, so one thing that we've been doing with Edelman, specifically within our digital marketing team, is we've been having every morning at 8:45 these digital huddles where it's a chance for everyone on our team just to kind of discuss what's been going on in their lives, what they're working on. It gives us a chance to meet their kids, see into their lives and into their homes. And we've been taking turns kind of giving people an opportunity to host these different sessions. And we found that it's just a really great way to kick off your morning and kind of amp you up for the day and keep you in a routine. Like, it gets you up and out of bed early in the morning. It gets you dressed and presentable for your team. We've also found that using different forms of communication like Slack, where we're able to just kind of differentiate our business talk with our water cooler talk to kind of keep up that company morale.
Yeah, and to add on to that, I think what we realize is that especially people who are specialists who hone a craft, like copywriters, designers, what have you, are thriving in this landscape. We're still communicating, we still have meetings, everyone has video on, but your home does create a safe haven to create more efficiently. So ultimately, could this perhaps be good for business and for teams to be more efficient?
Good point. Good ideas. I definitely are seeing Slack, WebEx, Microsoft Teams. There's several products that are out there that people are using. Anybody else have any other ideas or questions?
Hey, it's Jen Conrick. The one thing that my team is actually doing tonight is we're actually doing a 5 o'clock happy hour, just to kind of take the edge off and make sure that we're all connected, but it's not simply about work. Because some of us live by ourselves, and really excited for that opportunity too.
I think a lot of people are doing that, Jen. I'm hearing a lot about that, and I can't wait to see that. I've gotten invited to a couple. We recommended that to a couple of our Napa and Sonoma and Paso clients that they do a Friday night wine night and bring a chef in and talk about how to pair their wine and do some crazy stuff like that. So I think it's a great idea.
You know what's great about that, John?
What's that?
Nobody will be drinking and driving.
That's
No
right.
drinking and driving, and you can drink like hell. As a friend of mine wants to do a gin party and a tequila party, and I'm like, wow. He goes, why do you care? You can just get drunk as hell. Nobody's going to be driving. So,
The call goes until everybody falls asleep on it.
one thing that has surfaced from some emails from several of you is, we would like to continue these every couple of weeks. Again, during lunch hour, bring in somebody, talk about a subject, keep us fresh in business, what's going on. I think we're going to have a good sense of things. I'm looking down at my screen versus the big monitor about what's going on. Kelly, keeping the mentoring program, because I think mentoring now is also going to be a big part of each of us. How do we all help each other? How do we virtually grow? And what are some best practices as we get out there? And I think next week, people are going to start getting a sense of, okay, how do we move to that? I think, as Corey said, stage 2 or stage 3. If you have ideas, drop me a note. We are going to try to institute instead of a content after dark, a V after dark. So look for that very, very quick. Our friends at Think LA and Levima and DFW, Dallas Fort Worth, and the Seattle group joined today to listen in because they want to take this into their markets. I know Brandy was on. I saw my friends from Think LA as well. I invited Portland. I invited Denver to join. The idea of community and communication is very important. So anybody else have anything, any other questions, anything to share?
I have a quick question. It's Jim Conley. Hi, Corey. Hi, John. Hey, Brian. You mentioned earlier about, some rapidly evolving opportunities around disruption, the other side of May. Can you expand upon that? Because you also said at the board meeting you had some ideation going on as to what's going to get hit rapidly and what's going to grow rapidly, die rapidly.
I think definitely have an opinion on this. I think education is going to be a massive opportunity for marketers because the summer as we know it is going to go away. Schools are going to get their ass handed to them because there are no physical schools. Corey's comment about homeschooling and about where you get education and how virtual is going to be experienced. I saw it last night teaching my first virtual class. It's very different than having this type of call, the expectations, the things you have to do. Students' expectations of what they want. So I think the whole education, both paid schools and state schools and high schools and elementary, are going to look at how they're reaching out. Summer's going to go away. That's one category. I think short vacations, health spas, mental health is going to have an emergence over the summer. People are going to be camped up for a while. Their personal growth is going to be interesting. Coaching, how to reach out, spas is a category that has some strength. I think people are going to rediscover their neighborhoods and their regional, so local travel, like going back to Yosemite, finding new places in Tahoe, going up to Guerneville, going up to Mendocino Coast, rediscovering short vacations is going to be an interesting way. I'm not sure people can get on a plane. And they definitely can't go to Europe anymore or can't go to Asia. So international travel is going to be stopped for a while. In a business side, B2B, a lot of companies have June 30 as the end of their fiscal year in the technology space. Those people have money in May and June, so they're going to figure out ways to do stuff. Financial services often end September 30. So their quarter is going to be an interesting quarter for them. I think the summer is not going to be the summer that we know it. We don't have sports. My instinct is that the Olympics are going to get postponed. People are going to rediscover their own sports, their own entertainment, their own new ways of work life. And I think that bodes well. Maybe I'm being optimistic, but I definitely see education. I definitely see cars. I definitely see mortgages. I just think they're trying to figure out how to say it nicely and gracefully. Insurance. Security is going to be something that's going to be, people are going to be on people's mind. I also think that people are going to be so cooped up that DIY services and thinking about your house or your apartment. I want a new look. I want new furniture. I want new colors. I want something new. I think that's going to be a growth area in the summer. That's my read on it.
That's so interesting because everyone's going to be so sick of their surroundings. They're going to want to change it all up after being at home for that long.
I mean, if I were Wayfair, I'd stop everything now till May. I mean, you're in the same place. My God, I want to see a different color. I want to get this brown couch out and get another brown couch. So I think Lowe's, Wayfair, consignment stores, I think it's going to be an interesting place, home improvement.
One thing you didn't mention, John, which I think is really interesting, and I had a conversation about this with somebody yesterday, is the entertainment business. I think theaters are going to bomb, and I think a lot more direct to home releases are going to start happening because it's already happening from a conversational perspective. I know your favorite franchise, James Bond, they moved it from May till October because of this. And the theaters aren't going to easily recover if they just decide that the studios are going to go direct. Disney can release the next phase direct.
I think they made a mistake. I mean, I understand people in Hollywood just have that mentality, but I think Disney with what are they doing with Frozen?
Yeah.
I think is a brilliant move. Netflix coming out with the Spencer thing is just, I mean, I've walking my neighborhood. Everybody here has already seen Spencer. A couple of them watched it twice. Hell, it's only been out 4 days. I think, again, I view everything as pre-March 15th, and the new world began March 15th, 2020. Mm-hmm. And that's how I'm saying the items of March are brand new. Et brute. And I think it's a new world. John, Kelly, Chris. Hey, Kristen, you come on. I'm waiting for a question or a comment from you. I know she's there. She's mute. We really appreciate all of you doing this. Hello, Brian Starks. And so many of you, Adriana, if you're all on there, Greg, Marcus, Don. I'm trying to see everybody's name. Thank you all, Luke, for joining. Tear this apart, give us some great ideas, great learnings. The connected home is going to be another area. Somebody's just piping in. I think it's going to be strong. Anybody else have any other final comments? And we will hit the 1 hour spot.
I just had a quick question.
Go.
Do you think there'll be opportunities in digital marketing, considering that companies won't be having these events and that maybe people will be looking to their websites for information?
Oh, I think digital. I think digital is going to be the only survivor in the big. Yes, absolutely. They're going to be voracious for information.
Okay, good. I've been looking for another job, and when this hit, I'm just going, I'm going to be out of work for a while, but maybe not. Maybe there'll be opportunities.
Well, I think a lot of people I know on this call will be.
Yeah.
Have the same thing. I'm looking at many names from Chris and Kelly and Marcus and Greg and Don and Rich and Sophia and Timmy and Tony and Travis and Vivian and Zachary. We all think that. Yep. We sure as hell hope it. And I'm going to echo Marcus. Marcus, thank you. All of you, please be safe. Please get out, and when you walk and enjoy your neighborhood and discover the sun, but be safe. Be calm and let's all stay connected. Have a great Thursday. Cheers.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
John.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, WebEx. Thank you, Cisco WebEx.
Yeah, thanks, Corey.
Thanks.
Thank you, Corey.